Morning, everyone, and welcome to the meeting of Overview Scrutiny Committee of the first matter on our agenda is beg your pardon. Hopefully you're a little louder now, am I? Good, right. Minutes of the meeting, of the last meeting. We just turn to those and go through them for accuracy, please. Page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Are you content that they are an accurate record of that meeting and that I should sign them as such? Could I have a show of hands, please? Thank you. I will sign them in before I leave then. Thank you. Right, item 5 on our agenda is items of urgent business. I'm not aware of any. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest in relation to today's business? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Yes, I would like to declare a pecuniary interest in a property which is listed in or detailed in agenda item 12. I believe the report's for noting, so I don't expect a vote to be taking place, but if there is one, then obviously I will not take part in that vote. And if we go into private session and discuss anything concerning the property, then I will withdraw from the meeting at that point with your permission, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Are you content with that in terms of protocols? Good. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Any others? Right, thank you. Item 7, petitions from members of the public. I'm not aware of it. And consideration of any matter referred to the committee by a member. Again, I'm not aware of any. Item 9, responses of the council or the cabinet to the committee reports or recommendations.
Cabinet considered the committee's recommendations at their last meeting and accepted them, and that's recorded in the cabinet minutes. So,
okay, thank you. Right. Okay. At this point, I was going to ask for a change of the batting order, but we've got 2 presenting officers who need to leave at an early point, and by a head, the chief executive late last night won that particular competition by 15 minutes. Mr. Rosen, Officer Rosen needs to leave by 11. Officer Blatch needs to leave by 11:15. So with that in mind, I intend to let the batting order remain as it is, but rely on your cooperation to ensure that we do finish the enforcement matter before 11 o'clock. So unless anybody's got any objection to that, I intend to proceed in that way. Okay, thank you. Then turning to item 10, performance Q4 and cumulatively for 2021 and 22.
Thank you, Chairman.
Or did you wish to go first, Councillor Adams?
I'm happy to go first, if as long as that's okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So looking at Q4, starting with local homes for local need, I think good achievement with the 163 homes delivered against target of 100. Clearly, that is good, but we know it won't be enough given the challenges we have with the number of households on housing lists. Achieving these targets will become increasingly challenging now, of course, with nutrient neutrality, the biggest spanner in the works possible, really. Disappointed to see the government has been so quiet on these matters, to be honest, but local authorities in Norfolk are working together. I believe there are 72 authorities, areas across the country are affected by nutrient neutrality, so we're certainly not alone, even regionally. I see some commentators, I should stress, none of whom are actually represented at this council, have welcomed the guidance irrespective of its implications. But to say that to either of the 2,500 plus families on the various housing lists here in North Norfolk, well, I would challenge them to do that. We need to see the government do more to address housing needs. That's the bottom line here. You can all see in our delivery plan, it's lots of individual constituent parts in this area, which we are delivering. But we are still working around the issue, not being able to directly deliver housing ourselves. We have, during this period, seen the appointment of our energy officer, clearly a very good move in the present circumstances, and this will only become more valuable towards the last quarter of this year, of course. Dulcie is booking meetings with town and larger parish councils, I believe, at the moment, and has also been in touch with landlords besides householders. So very encouraging, and please do consider your own ability to support that work as local members. In business, in building business growth and sustainability, we have seen confidence in North Norfolk and plans a business has to set up in the east of the district. We've seen further investment in North Walsham, of course, which has been well publicised, and confident investment in our hospitality offer across the district, of course. Some in the west of the district are aware of work the district council is currently doing to realise opportunities there, and my hope is that this level of investment and confidence can be replicated elsewhere. Things are, of course, really taking shape with the Heritage Action Zone. Some way to go, of course. Usual issues you will see with the construction project, and there's a variety of different interests in the Cedars building. And as you can see, a number of businesses helped above and beyond the targets. In the customer focus area, planning performance improved, and we have improved the complaints process to really reduce process and focus on getting to the outcome for the resident and the service user. In the climate, coast and environment area, significant progress here in the last quarter. The net zero action plan, of course, was approved, and a huge amount of progress in reaching our tree planting target. So we've certainly got a challenge in maintaining that trajectory, as things like business travel are, of course, on the increase. So we really need to maintain our focus here. Quality of life, as you've heard before, the reef is continuing to exceed expectations. Some issues, I believe, around people not booking ahead now, but it's been a wonderful achievement for the council, showing our commitment to health and well-being. We are underway in delivering additional changing places facilities, and we've had a good conversation at the cabinet meeting most recently, reflecting the administration's ambitions for the future there. And obviously, we've been delivering facilities and hoping to deliver some facilities in North Walsham, sharing clearly intend on delivery in Stalham and Holt next. So whilst out of the reporting period, of course, we've had the marathon, and we know we've retained blue flag beaches, green flag woodlands, and perhaps ambitions in the future to grow upon the number of those designations. Finally, financial sustainability and growth. I suppose the main issue for consideration here perhaps is the rebates, and 90% of the rebates have actually been issued as of now. So we're now chasing for those people who haven't to apply, which I think makes up much of that 10%. So really good progress here, showing again how dynamic that team have been, reflecting on the scale of their achievements in the last 2.5 years, of course. So my own conclusion, besides that published within the report, very strong performance in achieving our corporate priorities, but propelling us, of course, into this year, but with some very big challenges around housing, particularly, which is my biggest concern for the district at this time. So that's all I wish to say at this time, Chairman, unless there's any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Flash, would you wish to follow that up?
Only to say that this report addresses or details the performance against the council's corporate plan objectives and ambitions. And previously, the committee has asked for comparative data with the performance of this authority with other local authorities, and that is now identified as a separate report to follow on the agenda in terms of the LG Inform, and that's comparison with other East of England authorities and family group authorities. And I think that allows a bit more drilling down into some of the issues around our performance of a comparative nature. So this report is around our performance against the administration's corporate plan priorities and headline objectives. And I think it's helpful to just place that in context in respect of the comparison questions, which have also been asked. I'm happy to take any questions.
Yes, thank you for that, and thank you for pointing out the difference, in fact, between these two items on the agenda, and we are dealing with them as separate items. And so in connection with item 10, it is very much about performance against the corporate plan. So any questions? Councillor Holliday.
I've got a general point, which is actually, if you compare the two reports, which I don't think is illegal, and you're allowed to cross-reference between our delivery plan report and the benchmarking. If you look at our delivery plan, we have a sea of green. And if you look at the actual benchmarking, you know, for number of households on the waiting list, for example, if you cross-reference that against local homes for local needs, we're the 4th worst in our CIPFA group. And if you say, for customer focus, the times for processing housing benefit claims were the 2nd worst. So I think my advice would be to look at the benchmarking as well as look at our notation, and then you might learn something quite interesting. I had a second point, let me just find my page, was about the number of affordable houses. Actually, when I looked at the equivalent report for this last year, we had a target of 183 and not 100. And we also had housing with care as a separate corporate plan objective. And I thought at one stage we measured them separately, and I wanted to know of this 160 houses, whether that included the housing with care flats or whether that was separate or not. So that was 2 questions. Is the target different? And does the actual number of affordable houses include the affordable housing with care? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Who'd like to respond to that?
In terms of the first point, I think in terms of the comparison, the drilling down in terms of the housing waiting list is something that we can go on to in item 11, because I think it is a useful point of reference to understand. And I agree with the point that Councillor Holliday has made in terms of the context for the local homes for local need priority. And again, that colour and context is important when you look at our performance regionally and against our family group. But the point you've made around benefits performance is fundamental and is critical and relevant to customer service. In terms of the affordable housing delivery, we will need to ask Nikki Debbage to comment or provide a breakdown of the schemes which have delivered in that time window, because I can't say definitely. Clearly, there was or has been completion of Meadow Court at Fakenham in the last 2 years, but I can't remember when that completion was attributed in terms of those outcomes. I think, and I don't know where the figure of 183 was in terms of a target and what that was made up of, so I'll need to come back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fredericks. And then Councillor Brown.
Good morning, thank you. I'm really happy to provide a breakdown to the committee if you would like that. I'll have that ready for you in the next meeting. Would that be okay?
That would be very helpful, I think, if you could.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. From memory, when I was portfolio holder for housing, I think there are 63 units in Fakenham at Meadow Court, which are regarded as as affordable homes, that it may be that has been factored out of the target figure. As Mr. Blatcher said, we probably need some clarity from the housing team.
The reduction from the 18183 to 165. I think the reduction from the 183 to 165 might be a slight slippage in the completion of the exception scheme at Long Lane in South Reps, because I think that was due to complete in March and is very near completion now. And I think they've had some material supply issues, which is impacting on the construction sector as a whole, but the units are now substantially complete, so they'll carry forward into this financial year. I don't know the position in respect of completion of Meadow Court in Fakenham.
Thank you. Councillor Cushing.
Before I ask my question, actually, I can provide clarity. There's actually 66 units in the Meadow Walk, 30 shared ownership and 36 rental of memory serves. I'd like to ask a question on page 46 at the bottom. It says 122A2, make the planning process easier for affordable housing providers. That had a deadline completion date of the 31st of March. I just wondered whether that's actually been achieved.
No, it hasn't been achieved, and that's why it's got a red non-delivery, and that is the red wedge within the local homes for local needs dial on the previous page.
I appreciate it was red there, but I just obviously this is a time lag between when the report was done, so that's why I was asking for the latest view in terms of that. So when might that actually be? Might we see that? I mean, pick up the point that Councillor Adams made. I mean, affordable housing, to my mind, should be one of the very top priorities of this authority. Yet here we are towards the fag end of the administration, and we still don't have a clear process way forward on that. And that's something which should certainly make an awful lot of difference. So when might we see that, please?
Councillor Fredericks.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Yes, we're talking to senior projects manager in housing, planning. Unfortunately, his time has been taken up by nutrient neutrality, and I'm not using that as an excuse, but we are still finding ways to make the planning process easier for affordable housing developers. We're going out to developers and meeting them actually next week. We're meeting with parish councils. We're trying to encourage them to bring forward exceptional sites. So there's lots of work involved in that. So yes, we will have that. We are scheduling that conversation, but it's a little bit difficult at the moment. But there's a lot of work going behind the scenes. Thank you for your question.
I think, Chairman, there was, I don't know where the paper is, Councillor Cushing, but in terms of the council's positive engagement and approach, the planning team, including the major developments manager, was commended in determination of the recent development at Weybourne Road in Sheringham, the Westwood development, in terms of the interpretation of the local lettings policy for that in respect of housing need in Sheringham. So it would be good to have a standard approach, but I think that there is the schemes are complex in terms of financial viability and deliverability, and I think that the appropriate conversations are taking place, but whether that allows a district-wide policy to be applied, that's something I think that we would need to ask Mr. Lyon and Nikki Debbage about further.
If I just one follow-up, when might we see the report, and when will it be able to come back to this committee, or can this committee actually see that report, Mr. Chairman?
Thank you. So I'm meeting with the team this afternoon, so we'll be going over that. So hopefully what I'll do is I'll tag that onto the breakdown that you've asked for affordable homes for your next panel, if that's okay by you.
Lovely. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Raising your hand, Councillor.
I'm just going to make a brief point that any process for bringing to being affordable homes from start to finish is normally a 2, if not 3 year timeline process from start to finish. So it's perhaps not surprising that this administration, only having been in power since 2019, is perhaps not in full flow as regards delivering affordable homes at this particular point.
Any other questions? Councillor Toy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think it's important, you know, again, as people are saying, it really is a complex thing. We get local resistance in places when we try to bring schemes forward, even though they're allocated sites sometimes. You know, we do talk about de-risking and all the opportunities and possibilities there, but it is such a complex thing now, completely messed about by nutrient neutrality and where that leaves us. But yeah, I think at this time we can say, yes, we're working on it. Where that will land, we don't know how that's going to work with nutrient neutrality and what may be required in terms of mitigation and how that will affect it. So it's difficult to put a timeline on it, but we can assure people that we are all working on it in all areas that are involved with it. And we would clearly like to see that delivered as well. But at this time, I would hate to put a date on it and then disappoint people. I don't think that would be reasonable. Happy to discuss it all the time. Doors always open to let people know where we are. We have the nutrient neutrality briefing coming along, which hopefully will help people understand. But until we have all the cards on the table, it's very difficult to define a way forward. And each scheme will be different as well. So it's going to be difficult to come up with a tailored scheme that will go with it. But thank you, Mr. Chairman, just for allowing me to put that in.
I think that's pretty widely understood. The impact of that is pretty profound. So thank you for that. Any other questions? I'm missing one somewhere. Oh, beg your pardon. Well, I wasn't looking far enough to there. Mr. Raston, I'm sorry.
I'll get my placard, Chairman, no problem. Members, I think it's important to reflect that as recently as last year, this council won an award, a national award from the Royal Town Planning Institute, by using innovation in terms of measures relating to partnership working with developers, registered social landlords, the legal process in relation to Section 106s, which enabled the delivery of housing across 3 sites within the district in an innovative way and concentrated the delivery of those homes in a more affordable and deliverable manner for the housing provider, which was critical to making those 3 schemes a success. Had it not been for that innovation in those projects, then those matters may have fallen to one side. So I think those are important lessons learned. And I know that Jeff Lyon and Nikki Davidge and Graham Connolly and the housing team will be taking those issues forward. We have strong linkages with housing providers in our district. I assure you, Chairman, that every effort will be made from the planning team and the service to take those innovative measures forward and to keep those good connections moving with the housing providers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see a hand raised from Matt on the screen. Is that a? No, right, okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Let me put a question to you then, and that is that we've got a 90-page report of data of one kind or another before us, and I think many points have been made in the past regard to how it's presented and formatted. And I wonder if there's a case for future meetings, whether this data might be presented in a more condensed way. And I'm thinking that perhaps we could consider looking at exceptions. So by exceptions, I'm talking about the ambers and the reds rather than all the greens, and whether that might be helpful. I'm just mindful that our next item is another item on performance, which may offer some new ways in which we might see that. So I just ask you that question, whether you would find that helpful or whether you want to continue with exactly the same type of report as we have at the moment. Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a really good point. As you know, I've said this on many occasions before. It gets to the point where you've got a report which to a degree is sort of impenetrable because it's got so much data in there. And the way to achieve that would be, as I've said on several occasions, is that you design a report based on outcomes, not actions. And this is just full of relatively low level actions, which may be required obviously for the teams delivering those things, but I don't really see what benefit we get from seeing those. So it may well be we just focus on the reds and the ambers, but there again, you've got the issue of marking your own homework. And as Councillor Holliday pointed out, we've got reports in here which is mainly all green, which contrasts quite markedly with the benchmarking report, where there isn't an awful lot of green in that report. So there's a slight discrepancy in there, which I think probably incumbent on us to try and tease out as we go forward. But I would certainly be in favour of something which should help consolidate the report, because I think when you get, trying to find your way through 80 odd pages. I mean, I don't know how many people actually gone through every action in there. I suspect most haven't. And if that is the case, it's not really working. And when I was working, one of my old bosses actually said is that when you do an MI report, the information should leap off the page for those people reading it. And truth and honesty, it doesn't really, I think, in this instance. So I think it's certainly worthy consideration what you just said.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Howard and then Councillor Holliday.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, actually Councillor Holliday before me, but if you don't mind, I'd just like to confirm that I agree with your point and with Councillor Cushing. I think we do need a much clearer, succinct means of reviewing the information that's put before us.
Okay, Councillor Holliday.
There's actually a lot of interesting detail here, which I'd be sad to miss, but we don't get a chance to discuss it. And I don't feel sometimes that, I mean, there's lots of stuff in here I'd like to know more about, where I feel there's a discrepancy between the action and the grading, and I think we should probe into it more. So in a way I disagree with Councillor Cushing, but I do think if we switched from process to outcomes, that would be magical. And if we could just do that one thing in the next report, that would save an awful lot of verbiage. But I'd hate to lose the fact that some of these statements and action and processes are somewhat opaque and perhaps not as speedy as one would like to see. And I wouldn't like to lose that granularity.
Yes, just picking up on that point, I don't think that we're going to shift from process to outcomes in the way that you describe. I think what we will be doing is simply taking out those greens that have already been recognised as on target, and concentrating on the ambers and reds. Sorry.
I just wanted to say that it is sort of considered good practice for scrutiny to look at exceptions reporting. I have discussed this with Helen a while ago, but we can look at that again. So you're just focusing on the exceptions of the ambers and reds. And I see Helen wants to speak.
Officer Thomas.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have plans in place over the next few months actually to totally review the performance management framework and review the reports that come to Cabinet and come to this committee as well. And what we're looking at the moment is very much exactly on the same page as Councillor Cushing outlined, is focusing on the key things that have been happening and things where decisions need to be made about either promoting something good that's happened or tackling issues where there are problems. Alongside that, obviously, overview and scrutiny would need to scrutinise what Cabinet is seeing in terms of their report. But alongside that, you can see other reports for you that you choose for yourself to see. So you've got a scrutiny role of Cabinet, but you've got scrutiny of performance role as well under the Constitution. So you can decide to look at whatever reports you want as a committee. So if you want to have a key performance measures report once a year to look at the annual indicators, for instance, I'm just plucking that out of the air. It's very much for you to decide what you want to see in addition to what goes to Cabinet.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. What you have in mind, what would that do? We've got 90 pages before us.
In terms of pages, I would want to get that down between 10 to 20 pages in total. So
does that sound like an appealing prospect?
So you'll be concentrating on, as you say, the outcomes, the key performance measures. You'd be looking at what has been completed in the previous quarter, for instance, and you'd be looking at things that have issues. And that will be the sort of thing that I'm proposing that goes to Cabinet. At the moment, very much, these are just a few ideas that there's a group of officers looking at the performance management framework and looking at these reports over the summer and there'll be recommendations coming to you in the autumn, early winter. For
Okay.
change.
Thank you. Councillor Howson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, if you took this amount of data as a board report in a normal commercial business, you would have a summary at the front page, which would cross-reference any significant points that were further in the report. And so whilst the green is somewhat, not erroneous, but difficult to sort of section out from the red and the amber, I would have thought the red and the amber should form the critical part of the summary of the report, and then with a consolidated position back to cross-reference later in the report. And that's how you'd present board papers. And I don't see why we shouldn't present it in that way.
Okay. Does that?
I'm happy to put that forward as one of the things that is looked at as a possibility for this committee and for Cabinet, if that would be useful to them.
I saw a hand raised somewhere there, but maybe that wasn't. No. Right. Okay. Any other comments in relation to perhaps the changes that we have just mentioned? Councillor Fredericks.
Thank you. I understand the points made, but I also think it's important that you see what has been delivered, and because I think there's a danger of maybe devaluing what has been achieved by the council and the officers. So I am concerned that if you're not seeing that information, then you're not seeing progress, you're just seeing other factors. So I think there's a discussion to be had, definitely, but I think there's a balance here as well.
Would there be merit in, let's see what emerges in the future with regard to what Officer Thomas has proposed, and see what that looks like? Councillor Penfold.
Just to support what Councillor Fredericks just said, actually, I think it is important that we do understand what's going well and what we've achieved, and that we learn from that, and we can share that good practice in other roles that we have. So I wouldn't want to lose that, but I do take the point that, you know, perhaps a more condensed summary or version would be preferable, but I certainly wouldn't want to lose my understanding of what's going well. And I think if we just focus on yellows and ambers, then that might skew our thinking somewhat. Thank you.
I recognise that, and of course, stacked against that is how we spend our time to make best effect and add best value. So it's about that kind of clarity and about that division of time. And I just wonder if that's a move that we should try, and we'll see what it looks like. Councillor Fredericks again.
I'm terribly sorry, I'm not even on your panel. Perhaps it would be a really good idea for members to have a briefing again on how to use InPhase as well, so they can see the information before the meeting.
Well, we've got an outline, haven't we, from what Officer Thomas has said, and maybe that's something, because it sounds like work in progress. Why don't we see what that looks like next time around, and you can make those kind of observations across the board then. But I think at the moment, we're probably not talking with any precision about what that will really look like and the pluses and minuses that we might see around that. So this is about trying to move forward and be a bit more focused and make best use of our time as we possibly can. And I wouldn't want to lose sight of those things that we should be celebrating, if you like, on and making use of good practice. So that isn't the aim of the exercise. The aim of the exercise is to give us more time on more focused items that we might be able to have better effect without losing sight of those things that have already been succeeded or are succeeding well. Are we minded to go along with what has been proposed as a way forward?
If we can schedule that in as an item for discussion for, say, your September meeting to review what Helen's suggesting, and I think you know, just as a point, obviously all members can access all of this information at any point, and Scrutiny's role is to scrutinise and challenge, and obviously it is there to recognise good practice, but you are there also to be seeing how we can improve and, where additional work can be done. So I think if Helen brings back an item in the autumn with suggested approaches, and then members can decide then, if they're happy, which model they want to go with. And if you're in agreement, Matt and I could add in that to the work programme. But there is a lot of work that goes on within the scrutiny sector around scrutinising performance. It is quite a specialised area, and it does take, you need to be really focused and know what you're looking at to get the best outcome. So I can also do some work with Helen around making sure that the committee is able to achieve that and focus where it needs to be focusing. So.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Holliday.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to suggest we looked at the structure of the report before September, so that in September we could actually have the finally agreed report in that format. So we would see Helen's new report next meeting next month. Is that we read already? I think that's much. Otherwise, we'll be forever.
Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I'm in agreement with Councillor Halliday, but also I'd like to say there's no desire to erode the good work that's been done, but we are overviewing scrutiny, and really we want to know things that aren't going well. That's the key issue, and we can balance that as long as there is reference to all those points that have gone well. But we're actually looking at the things where there's slippage and where perhaps things are getting a little bit out of kilter. And I think if there is more clarity and it is more succinct, I think it's going to help us all.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Seward.
Thank you, Chairman. You and I have been around on this council for a long time. And when I listen to some of this, I'm not against trying to make scrutiny more effective in this area. But of course, I do recall where we've come from, as I'm sure you do. And I think when Councillor Cushing says this is people marking their own homework, yes, I've also been of the view at times looking at these reports, it's a bit of a beauty contest. Just like to put forward what looks good. But of course, when I took that view, I was in opposition. And I have to say, when I looked at these reports in opposition, I found them dense, impenetrable, and very difficult to get to the truth. And I do remember, as you will, a certain enterprise park that was proposed out on the western side of the district, and all we saw coming before scrutiny for a very long time was just in progress, in progress, in progress. And eventually, when the two of us did start to say, well, it can't be in progress for year after year. So I just sort of put that context because that's where we were, and trying to find a better way through is not easy. In terms of marking our own homework, when you and I first arrived on this council, performance reports were checked against certain standards by the then Audit Commission. That was an independent body. Unfortunately, a government got rid of it. They just thought it was over bureaucratic. The problem is, of course, you then end up marking your own homework. And I do think sometimes, because in this current day and age of politics, you say one thing one week and you forget it all next week. And of course, that's led by the Prime Minister, is that we do need to remember the history and the context, because if we don't, we're going to struggle to make the improvements that are being asked for today. So I'm just making those comments to actually give some context to where we are. And if there are shortcomings in where we are at the moment, this is not something that's suddenly arisen in the last year or two. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are we minded to run with what Officer Denny has proposed as a way forward? Do I see
Mr.
any...
Chairman, could we have it more quickly than September as a question?
Sorry?
I think we see this more quickly than September. I think that's what I would like to see, because obviously, times are ticking. We're in June now, so I don't see why we should necessarily do another couple of 3 months.
Yeah, so you've got a meeting in July, but we don't have a meeting in August. So
No.
I don't, that.
Realistically speaking, September is the earliest, is it?
I think so. I'm looking, obviously, as Helen's doing this work, so I don't want to.
I think September is a realistic date. I think there is very significant pressure from various initiatives on the authority at the present time, writing levelling up bids, responding to the Ukrainian refugee issue, the nutrient neutrality issue. Many of those things are not in the control of this council, and they are a response. And indeed, we're seeing increasing demand on services because of the cost of living crisis. I think in all reality, I think that Helen Thomas and Linda McGilligan have agreed or set a date to meet with Councillor Cushing and Holiday to discuss the performance management reports in terms of the direction of travel that they would wish to see. And I think that would be the report that is now being talked about. But I think the reality of officers being able to produce something for your meeting on the 13th of July, I think would be highly ambitious. So given that August doesn't have a meeting, I think September is the first realistic date that could be achieved.
Okay, thank you. Willington.
Sorry, can I just clarify? It's the use of the word report. So are we talking about a report coming to us that would highlight perhaps some of the different options that are available? Or are you talking about the report coming in this report coming in a new format? I'm slightly unsure about what's been said.
I will look to Helen for that.
Yeah, I think it would actually be both.
Right, okay.
So there will be a number of formats, a number of different reports that you might have, plus also proposals for your work programme and things to go in that, and also the draft performance management framework that will be produced, the new one. So there'll be a whole range of things to look at one point.
Right.
And I think in response to that question, I would like to say that so the council's licence for this performance management system should technically end at the end of this calendar year. And I've advised Officer Thomas that should be extended, because I don't think it is appropriate to move 6 months in advance of an election to a new system. So the read across isn't there. So in terms of transparency, this is the system the authority has used, and that decision was made to use the in-phase system was determined in the previous administration. So in 2017, 2018, it was a 5-year contract. If it comes to the end in November of this year, I don't think that is appropriate in terms of being open, transparent and accountable in the run up to full council elections next May. So Mrs. Thomas is looking at a procurement that would go, or a decision to be made on a procurement of a new system by the new council, but we would use this system for the next 12 months, such that consistency is there, because otherwise would be direct comparison if you used a different model, and I don't think that's appropriate at that juncture. So it will be a refinement. The options, I think that Ms. Thomas has said, would be presented in September, would be how this data could be presented in a more condensed, simplified form. There is a focus on areas of red rather than lots of comment that is green, in terms of the comment around marking, the authority marking its own homework, but we're not looking at changing the structure or model in advance of the district council elections. And I think it's important that that is said and understood by everybody at this point in time.
Thank you for that clarification. With that clarification, can we close the matter at this point and move on? Are we content to proceed as proposed with regard to a report in September, which will consider all the issues that we've discussed this morning? Okay. Do I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Housden, do I have a seconder? Councillor Cushing, could I have a show of hands to support that? It looks like it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on then to item 11. I think you've done partially the introduction already to that, haven't you, Councillor Adams. I'm just thinking about time as well.
Well, I'm quite happy to briefly chip in and just say, my own view is you've got to choose a range of different measures, challenges and positives. So you can see where, in many cases, the council is excelling above neighbouring similar authorities. You can see, some of the best council tax collection, but as has been pointed out, some of the most challenging numbers of households on the waiting list, and that was mentioned during the previous discussion. But I think it's important to understand the context, really. North Norfolk is certainly one of the most desirable places in the eastern region to live, certainly above many of those similar family authorities too. And you can certainly go anywhere and you will find people who know Cromer, Shering and Wells and will have their favourite villages to the east and west of those towns. We obviously have the second home pressures, but also the inward migration pressures from other parts of the country, which grew significantly around the pandemic, driving an increased demand for housing here. I know during the last item, the new claims for benefits and changes in housing benefit claims was raised, and something I think where it's fair to say the eastern region struggles with as a whole. You can see that within the report. Processes are in place in North Norfolk and very robust, but the speed of delivery is an area for development. We've seen staff turnover in this area, lots of challenges, changes in circumstances among our customers have increased drastically. Council tax support, of course, has been a big burden, and with the living cost crisis obviously biting. We have a bit of backlog here, and we should see that is cleared, and we must utilise the new burdens funding more effectively than we have done before. But I think you can see how well the council performs in many cases against other local authorities. Another area that you might want to highlight, of course, is recycling. It's something that the whole of the eastern region performs fairly poorly on, and this isn't unique to us. We do outperform Norwich, Yarmouth, Brecon, Kingston, but it's not good enough, and I want residents to understand the financial implications to them, perhaps, as a ratepayer, contaminating recycling, because it's we want recycler to help pay for the service besides the environmental impacts of waste processing and the creation of new packaging materials. But of course, there are lots of environmental concerns with recycling. That's all I wanted to say for the time being, but if there's anything I can do to chip in at a later stage, I'm very happy to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Officer Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. As you will recall, earlier this year.
Could you just draw the microphone a little closer to you, please?
Yeah, I speak very softly as well, so that doesn't help.
Just
Is that any better? As you recall, earlier this year, there was a briefing session with Overview Scrutiny members outlining all of the benchmarking information that was available. And as part of that briefing, the Chief Executive put forward as a list of a number of measures that he thought it would be useful that the Overview and Scrutiny looked at where we might need to take some action, which the briefing agreed with, and why those are included in this report now. So these are the areas where potentially we might want to take some action, because these measures are important to either the district council or the district as a whole. Of course, the benchmarking then is about saying, right, that is important. This performance is below where we want it to be. And then the next step is to decide, or for this committee to make recommendations to Cabinet to say, right, we need to do something about that. Let's have a look at the authorities that are achieving very high performance in this particular area, find out how they're doing it and try to apply that if we can. So that is the focus of this benchmarking activity. In my opinion, you might have a different opinion on what you think the outcome of that should be. But the idea is to focus on those areas where there does need to be improvement, and that's within the council's judgment of that, and then decide what action or propose action from this committee to take some action to improve that. So the idea of providing this information is to give you the opportunity to make those recommendations to Cabinet on taking action on any improvements you think are warranted. And that's then to hand over to you to decide whether you do want to make any recommendations.
Okay, thank you. Questions then, Councillor Holliday?
Lovely. I'd just like to reiterate my points that I made earlier, saying that we are the fourth worst in that number of households on the housing waiting list. We're second worst in the times to process housing benefit claims. We're the third worst in the household waste recycling. And if you look at the all English numbers, we're almost at the bottom of the pack with the rate of births of new enterprises. And so that was one point. So I think we should discuss that. I don't see any actions here in the recommendations. I don't see that we're being asked to make any decisions about actions. You know how that riles me. And there's a couple of other all English comparators I think we should look at. For example, for the total expenditure for central services per the head of the population, we're above the mean. And for total expenditure on environmental and regulatory services per head of the population, we're above the mean. This is all English data. And I know that you think public health isn't a district issue, but if you look at the obesity data, etc., and the way we discuss our wellbeing strategy, I do think that should inform what we're doing in terms of leisure services. So even though public health isn't a district council priority, there are actually the consequences for our population that we cannot ignore. So I think there are additional metrics that we should be looking at. They may be all England rather than the local comparators. And I do think we should be setting some actions now as to what we will be deep diving into, and so we can actually make some improvements. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Officer Thomas, will you wish to respond to that?
It's very much for Cabinet, advised by officers, to decide on action on any of these issues. And that is for Cabinet to decide which of those to take up and what action to call for. But you're perfectly free to make recommendations for action. And obviously, once Cabinet made those decisions, to scrutinise those decisions.
Wish to come back on that.
Can we make recommendations today then that we look at these areas where we're worst performing? And we make a recommendation that we add in some extra benchmarking, I think would better inform our view of the council. Can we make those recommendations today?
You are able to make those recommendations today, yes. I think the issue is, in terms of a scarce resource, where would you like to target your scrutiny and focus? I think there are some of the issues that have been highlighted there, and it might not be appropriate to address those now, but in terms of the housing waiting list, you're absolutely right in the statement you make. We're the fourth worst in these comparators, but as the leader of the council says, if you look at the other poorly performing areas, that is areas of very high second home ownership and holiday home ownership, where the policy instruments available to you, have been pursued by Duncan Baker MP, and Councillor Withington has supported those representations to government. And there are some responses in the Levelling Up white paper which may allow us additional tools and policy instruments moving forward to address that issue. So I think you have to see that figure. I think everybody in the room is uncomfortable with that figure, but the ability for us to directly influence that is complex, and that isn't an excuse. I think it is a statement of fact. I think in terms of the recycling, which is another one, the leader of the council say, if you look at that, the geography of the East of England map for recycling, Norfolk and Suffolk do not do well in that context relative to areas which are more densely populated, and where the issue of cost versus service delivery is a significant factor, and many rural authorities struggle to operate a viable food waste collection service, which is a significant element of the recycling waste stream, and Mr. Hems is better able than I to comment on that. I think the issue that concerns me in these 7 or 8 indicators compared at a regional and family group measure is the benefits performance, and that does concern me. And through Karen Hill, People Services Assistant Director, when I presented this information to her, she is working on an improvement plan that would seek to address that issue. And that's the one that gives me greatest concern at the present time, because that can't be contextualized, because I think all authorities are seeing with inflationary pressures, all authorities are seeing a larger number of presentations. And so the fact that we aren't improving in that sense is a concern, and that's something that I think we should scrutinise more. I'm open-minded if we add additional costs, additional indicators for assessment. The central costs one is something that I've identified, and that is something we need to understand further. I don't know if I share Councillor Holliday's concern so much around regulatory and environmental services, because that is something in terms of, you know, a privilege to live in an area of high outstanding landscape and environment. And so I think that's something that you could legitimately say was you were comfortable spending more on, but that's a choice, a political choice or an organisational corporate choice. I think you're right to identify the central cost as an issue that we need to understand further.
I would just simply say that I think I take it as read, actually, that all benchmarking indicators, there has to be a contextual background to that. And it is not as simple as just simply comparing one bald figure with another. And that's not what I don't think we would want to do. I think that what we want to do is to try and move to areas where we can have a better understanding about where we're doing well, where we're not doing well, why we're not doing well, and what we can do about it. That's how this committee can add value to this process. If we're just looking at straightforward, data and not really doing anything in terms of processing it within our own minds and having discussions about it, then I don't see where we can add value to it. So it's about within that total spectrum of performance management, how can we take a different slice and look at something differently and perhaps learn and inform that? And I don't want to have a long debate about this today, really. I just want to put this forward, and this has been something that's been on our minds. We've discussed from time to time, and I think this is the first look at it. I don't want to draw into too many conclusions from today, but I think what it does offer is a new opportunity and an opportunity to do some fresh work. So that's really what it's about. So I'm anxious to kind of curtail the questions. Very short, if you would, please.
I am very
Councillor
short, I'm only
Fredericks.
5'4". So as relating to the housing benefits claim, our speed of processing time for new benefits is 17 days and our target is 20 days. So we're just 3 days behind. What's happening is the housing benefits, as we used to know it, the legacy benefits are now changing over to universal credit. So they're responsible for paying the housing element of the housing benefit as were. So, and this is taking up to 5 weeks for a new claim. So there you can see the complexity, as you were saying, Chairman, about benefits and our responsibilities, DWP responsibilities. And we're also looking at doing more online. So we're looking at software to make this quicker and people can do this online quicker. We're also looking at an outside source just to help us get over the hump, because the benefits team have done an amazing job at distributing the housing support fund, council tax benefit. Obviously, that's been an upward thing. I shall wind up. So basically it's about complexity, but I'm always here. Please email me if you have a question. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I think we don't want to get too deeply involved in responses right now. This is about kind of making decisions around, do we want to look at benchmarking in the future, and how do we do that, and how can we get best value from it? I've got several hands, Councillor Withington, Councillor Toy and Councillor Blathwaite. In that order.
I'm aware Councillor Halliday has made a recommendation of sorts, but I'm not sure how what the process is on that. I was wondering whether it would be more appropriate at this stage if we asked Cabinet to come back to us with the areas that they feel, so with that contextual view as well, because we are already looking at some of these areas through the planning performance. Some of these areas are coming up in that review that's ongoing and coming back to us. And with the CC Council Call for Action, I think that's one of the issues that will be looked at within that as well, in terms of our issues with the housing waiting numbers, etc. So I would have thought it would be more appropriate that rather than just having everything looked at, that we ask Cabinet to look at those areas and come back to us with some focus that they would like us to have on particular areas, rather than just a random across the
I take the point that you make, but I would just simply say that this committee should be independent of Cabinet, and therefore its decisions with regard to scrutiny are for us to take, not for Cabinet to kind of guide us or tell us. So we're trying to work collegiately and collectively in that way. So I don't think that we wouldn't want to take those into account, but in the end, it's for this decision, it's for this committee to make, not for another, I would suggest.
Okay.
Also, if you just look at the recommendations, there is a request for the committee to choose the measures that you're interested in and recommend those through to Cabinet rather than the
Yes.
other members.
Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Toy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, and I accept it's your committee, so I'd just like to offer a couple of thoughts in. One is there's a danger of, you've just talked about keeping down the data, that you're going to end up with a lot of data to go through again to understand why the difference is. And also that perhaps the question is, there is this, you take an item, you say, we believe, we can see that we're behind on this. What is happening in the council? Because we've had the councillor call for action, Officer Black saying about things that are going on. Councillor Frederick saying things that are going on. So there are things that are happening to address these, and maybe then we can give you a report on those things that concern you. So I'm offering that as a suggestion of a way of keeping down the data, rather than us supplying you with lots of data saying this is what's going on here, what's going on there, and you come with a recommendation forward. That actually, first of all, you might ask, we're concerned about this area, can you tell us what is going on in the council to address that? A suggestion. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Blatch.
And I think if on to following Councillor Toy's comments, if you look at the two indicators for planning performance, concern was expressed through this committee about our planning performance. I think members were told that it was to do with the system implementation, but you can see now that, after a very poor performance in Q1 and Q2 of 2021, our performance now is good, if not very good, against those indicators. So that's part of that improvement journey, and there's still work to do, and the team are doing that. In the context, there will be a dip again because of nutrient neutrality, but that's that contextual understanding of the data. But the journey in planning, shown by these graphs, both regionally and against our family group, is positive. The direction of travel and trend is positive around that area of activity. But that is something that this committee identified as an area of concern 15, 18 months ago.
And just picking up on the point that you made, Councillor Toy, I see that as part of that process that we would always want to follow. This is about how do we access some of the maybe not necessarily new information, but information from a different direction. And what can we add to that? How can we be more constructive, if you like? And I think that understanding begins with being presented with the data.
Yeah, you need to ask the question, and we, Cabinet, council officers, can bring to you the stuff that's already going on. That's what I'm saying, is that work is potentially already going on within the council. There's no need for an extra piece of work. Get that person that's dealing with that to bring that to you. Then if you want further, there's a process there for you to save you having loads of data to trawl through.
Indeed.
I offer that as a suggestion, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Okay, Councillor Bathwaite.
Just a quick point. I noticed that South Lakeland appears in our data quite a lot. It's just that isn't there anymore. It's Westmoreland and Barrow. So Liberal South Lakes is now Liberal Westmoreland and Barrow. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I think lastly, if I may.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I agree with most of the comments. I do feel, it would be good to see the committee focus on benefits in area. It's an area, of course, we as an administration want to see market improvement. I just wanted to see if I could put a couple of issues to bed though that are on the report. The fly tipping issues not being collected. I think there was a big difference between our understanding of how fly tipping reports are actioned and what's happening here. And I think that was actually down to a tab that wasn't being clicked on a web form. So, I mean, I had a 2-hour response on a fly tipping collection last week. So you know, it's very good actually in terms of those responses. So I'd say that's something you don't need to look at. That's my own view. And the team, I think, are going back through reports, adjusting, ensuring that that the officers are doing that correctly. And another one was arrears over 90 days. I believe that referred to essentially about £1,000. So it's probably not a very good strategic measure of the council as a whole when we're talking, I think, about a roadside allotment area or something along that sort of size where we haven't tracked down the tenant. So I just wanted to say those two are probably not areas of significant concern. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can we move on then to the recommendations? And we've got 4 recommendations before us. Are you comfortable with those recommendations that have been made? Bearing in mind the discussion that we've had. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Brown, and a seconder. Councillor Blathwaite, could I have a show of hands then, please? We'll take them on all 4. That looks like unanimous to me. Thank you very much indeed. Right. Okay. Can we then move on then to item 12, which is planning enforcement. Simply I'll go back here. Enforcement update for June 22. Councillor Toy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try and be brief. You know, appreciate an officer's time for this morning. All I wanted to do was, as an overview, actually, I think you remember from last time we brought this here, there was a lot of detail about particular cases that we got into discussion with, and this is about the performance. So hopefully you have a bit more of a concise report here. Information on individual cases is available. It's also across 3 portfolios as well. So although I have the enforcement hat, if you like, and Officer Rosen is here presenting for us, this is a combined enforcement board. And I think just in that context, I think in the point of time, I will let Officer Rosen give the report if he has anything to add. Thank you.
Okay. Just before I hand over to Mr. Rosen, there were 2 matters that I'm stuck in my mind from last time we reported. One was, yes, the volume of the detail, and we've done splendidly on that. And this is the kind of report I think that we do certainly want to see. Could I just ask you though whether you are comfortable with a number of terms that we use in the report, which are what I would call non-dimensional and could be very easily put into metrics. The number or the times that I see a number rather than it's the words a number when, for example, if it's 25, then why don't we say 25? If it's about using metrics that tell us a value rather than saying a number or an increase or a decrease. And I would invite you to read through the report and see how many times that is shown there. And in order to add value, this committee needs the best kind of information it can. So to have metrics in there is so much more valuable than having just saying, you know, various or a number. I found myself asking too many times, how many then? Or by how much? Where we've got increases and decreases, what is that increase and decrease? There may be something good to celebrate in that. There may be something to look at and be more critical of. But we would value, I think, and appreciate that to be more definitive in that way. And that was one of the things that we mentioned last time, and it doesn't seem to have happened this time. I have to say that if the report had been made available for pre-agenda meeting, I would have picked that up and would have asked for those to be, if you like, dimensionalized metrics put in there, because that would have made it more helpful. But that didn't happen. And so we've not had that opportunity. But it would be really good if we could have a report, even after this meeting, which just kind of can be pinged around by email, which puts those metrics in, would be really helpful.
Yeah, no, I accept your comments. In fact, it wasn't in relating to this report. It was another report, but yes, you have made these comments before, and I accept that, and we will look at that. I will obviously have to talk, as I say, it's in 3 different areas to make sure that we can get that data to you, as timely as possible. So I can't promise you we'll have that by the end of the week, but I'd take those comments. I'm happy to do that. I think in the bid to reduce the amount of data that you had last time, we've perhaps gone too far. So I accept that, and we'll look at that, and I'm happy to take those comments forward. Thank you. It's those Air Force people, Mr. Chairman. It's those Air Force people.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much for that. Mr. Rosen, if you can possibly compete against the background noise, which I feel is about to descend on us for a few minutes.
Unless there's another one coming along, Chairman, I'll go now. Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you very much, portfolio holder. Your points are noted regarding metrics and data. We will resolve those with the portfolio holder. I'm here today with you. I'm reporting as a substitute for Martin Fulcher, our Director of Place and Climate Change. Members, please note that Martin is now the Senior Responsible Officer for the Enforcement Board and providing this report to you. In terms of the Enforcement Board, I think it's important to reflect on the closure of a long-standing case, a 9-year impasse at Little Harbord House, Overstrand Road, Cromer, where we have successfully negotiated and resolved the outcome of granting a planning permission, which will regularise the issue on that site. It will deliver housing at Little Harbord House and will enable us to withdraw the enforcement notice. That's no mean feat, Chairman. That has taken some considerable time and effort, and we are pleased to report that to you today. There are ongoing works which are moving cases forward. Alternative remedies are being reported. Obviously, the details of that are within the broader Enforcement Board reports in the members area, and we are moving towards where processes for negotiation and discussion are exhausted, where prosecutions are being drafted and taken forward. We are taking issues such as charging and insolvency actions under 4 cases. Those are recommended at section 2.7 of your agenda today. In terms of long-term empty homes, the overall figure for long-term empty homes remains at no more than 1% of the district. Conscious of the metric, Chairman, I'll report to you today that the expectation is that the registered number of empty homes falling within the categorisation will fall below 400 homes very shortly, and is expected to be maintained at that level when we report to you again, Chairman. We will be working forward in terms of joint working with the Housing Strategy team and the Enforcement Board to adopt a specific policy in regard of long-term empty homes. Our expectation is that we will be delivering reporting with adoption by the autumn of 2002. That should enable us to consider the issues of compulsory purchase orders and EDMO actions against those significant long-term empty properties, which are proving difficult to move on, Chairman. Reporting on the work of the combined enforcement team, I see that the team's caseload remains high. I'll quantify that for you, Chairman. We've got 245 cases. This is down from 305 reported in our last quarter. And to date, we have 144 new cases recorded in this calendar year, and 164 cases have been closed. I think, Chairman, it's important to report to you in terms of service transformation The enforcement team have a revised web page which was delivered in December of 2021. We have included recently an interactive complaint reporting form, an e-form, which enables the enforcement officers to have clarity around elements of complaints such as the precise location, the nature of the complaint, and goes through a clear and consistent form of delivering evidence to the enforcement team at the earliest outset of their investigations. That, Chairman, is supported with an expediency matrix, which now enables the enforcement team to have clarity and consistency in terms of measuring expediency of action against those complaints and their investigations. And Chairman, I'm pleased to report that a revised enforcement plan is now delivered for the team to base their decision making on and to give clarity around the enforcement actions across the district. So there has been significant service transformation. Chairman, I will be reporting to you shortly and to the members of the development management team that we will be going through a recruitment campaign to deliver a conditions monitoring officer and also to add an enforcement trainee apprentice to the team. So there will be 2 further officers added to the combined enforcement team. Thank you very much for your time, Chairman and members. I would confirm I have made my attendees of my 11 o'clock meeting aware, and they have my apologies. So I'm here for as long as you need me.
Okay, thank you. Can I just ask you, on page 207, at the top of the page where you comment on the waterfront rooms in Houghton, and that's a topic that you and I have both spent some hours on in recent months, making progress. But I notice you've written there, closure expected on receipt of application. That sounds like an ambitious statement, bearing in mind that we've been waiting many years, A, for the application, and B, the application needs to be approved, and C, the application needs to be delivered on in terms of the site needs to be cleared and developed. That sounds like a long way off from receipt of application before the problem is closed.
I'm very pleased to comment on specifics. Chairman, I think it's important that the enforcement board matrix has got some clarity around what expectations are required. The reasons that we're engaged on the waterfront rooms at Houghton is as a potential compulsory purchasing authority in that particular matter. If a planning application is received, then I agree, Chairman, we are some distance from seeing development taking place. However, that is a significant moment within the progress of that matter. I would suggest, Chairman, that that may be an issue where the matter can be closed if the application is refused, is not being delivered because of issues surrounding problems around site delivery, then there's no reason why the matter cannot come back onto the enforcement board and be reopened as a new issue. I would suggest to you, Chairman, that that is a significant point of progress in receiving an application after these many years.
I take your point on the technicalities of that, but one shouldn't forget these reports are public documents. And so the good burghers of Houghton, for example, and Wroxham will see this in the public domain. And it is their view that I think we need to take into account rather than around the technicalities about, you know, I do think that we just need to be a little bit more, I think, careful when we say closure, because closure, as far as our people, our residents are concerned, will only be when that site is cleared and it is redeveloped. And I think we just need to manage expectations here in perhaps a little bit more of a perhaps cautious way. The other question I was going to ask, and I may have missed it, but there was one, and I think Councillor Holliday may well know more about this, much more than Arcadia. Is that not an issue still, or has that been resolved? Or
the matter of Arcadia relates to the demolition of an unauthorised dwelling at Clynex the Sea. Councillor Holliday is extensively briefed on that matter. The position is that Arcady remains on the enforcement board matrix as we await the outcome of a planning enforcement appeal. Once that planning enforcement appeal is resolved, then we will consider whether or not that matter should be closed at that time. The issues are different because we remain the enforcing and planning decision-making body in Cley, whereas we're not in Hobbiton. Clearly, as the Broads Authority, they are the planning determinants of any planning application that comes forward. Whereas at Cley with Arcady, we will remain the enforcing and the planning determining body on that matter. But I can confirm for you, Chairman, for Councillor Holliday, Arcady does remain on the enforcement board matrix.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Housden and then Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Data Set Business Park. £123,000 worth of business rates outstanding. Have they been collected yet?
The position with the business rates is that they are moving forward through the legal process, and those matters are subject to reclaim as a result of legal actions. We have no commitment for those monies to be repaid. We are pursuing those matters legally, and our expectation is that those will either be reclaimed through legal action or that they will be reclaimed as a result of negotiation before that legal action is completed.
Mr. Chairman, I've got minutes of a meeting of the 30th of September, nearly 9 months ago, and really nothing's moved forward. And as I can understand it, there's 123,300 outstanding, £94,000 of it due to liability orders, and the remaining 29,000 in the process of going through the courts. We don't have any information about that here, and I think we should have more information. It's just a very significant sum of money.
Do you wish to respond on that,
Mr. Chairman, I can add no more than the fact that the enforcement board take that issue very seriously. We are expecting action from East Law, but we are governed by the availability of court time. It is clearly a high priority, and that will be reflected in our discussions at the enforcement board, and the views of the ward member will clearly be reflected within those discussions.
Mr. Chairman, also the Environment Agency were called into that meeting, and I'd like to know what they've done, because they were called in to do to pursue licenses, because the £12,000 licence for the Tyre Mountain, which had more tyres dumped on it over the Jubilee weekend, there's no licence. And this has been going on, and these minutes, I was precluded from the meeting, 30th of September. I don't find it good enough, to be honest.
They are the minutes of which meeting?
They're the minutes of a meeting which is held on Teams. If you'd like to know who was there, Steve Blatch, Martin Fulcher, Mr. Ralston, Emily Capps, Alexa Baker, Sean Knight, Emma Pate, Roger Thomas, Environment Agency, Naomi Rodrigo, Environment Agency, Neil Campbell, Planning Officer, Nick Johnson, Head of Planning, and Jerome Mayhew, MP.
Okay, yeah. And that was September last year?
September the 30th.
Yes. Okay.
Chairman, the matter of the Environment Agency, I will report back directly to the ward member on. That is a matter for them as the enforcing body on the issue of licensing. In terms of the progression of the enforcement notice, clearly the report notes here that we will be moving forward to service and will be looking to prosecution within the autumn of this year.
Okay, thank you. That actually prompts me to a point that I had in mind on paragraph 5, which is on page 209, where you, I think, have given assurance that members continue to be kept informed of enforcement board cases being taken forward in their wards. I'm not sure that I could agree with that, and I think I've just heard concordance on that point. And I thought I was perhaps the only one, but it sounds I'm not the only one, and I wonder whether this is rather patchy and whether there is more work that needs to be done. Certainly, I know in the case of the waterside rooms, for example, that matter would not be progressed in the way that it is now if it was not for the action of both myself and Parish Council in pushing the Broads Authority in particular. And I know we work alongside the Broads Authority, but that was just one example. And you will probably know from as early as January when we had our first meeting. Our target was to get the site improved by Easter. And now we're going to be very lucky to get it improved by June, by the end of June. But it's that kind of thing. I'm not seeing that evidence. And
can I come back to you on that, Mr. Chairman? There was a meeting on the 8th of this month because Anglia Film Studios have been courting members here, and I was excluded from that meeting. Now, I've known about Anglia Studios since the pre-application went in for the 500 houses, because this is a strategic move that's being made. And then I got an email from the chief executive. The planning consultant had actually been ringing my mobile phone while I was sparked out having surgery in hospital, and that was 6 weeks ago. I've known about it. I know all about it. So why was I precluded from that meeting? It beggars belief.
Chairman, I think we should be drawn back to the purpose of reporting enforcement to the overview and scrutiny panel, which is the issue of considering recommendations. The issue of keeping members updated is certainly something we can take forward. We produce the reports of the enforcement board actions, those are in the members area. If there is a recommendation that we can take forward, then clearly we can review that with the members of cabinet and our portfolio holder. From our point of view, we are briefing on a number of issues, as I've alluded to. If there is a requirement for more information, then obviously ward members are more than welcome to approach officers, and we will report back directly to those officers upon those requests. The difficulty, Chairman, is that we have a number of outstanding items on the enforcement board matrix, and so we need to understand what level of feedback is required across those matters. In terms of the individual matters relating to Councillor Houston, then I can't confirm, as I wasn't party to the meeting in the 8th of June, and I wasn't party to that meeting being set up, so I can't comment further on it, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Officer Denny.
I just wanted to comment in regard to notifying local members. This is an issue that has come up regularly, and some of you who sit on licensing will remember the same issue came up, and licensing committee did make a formal request to officers that they be kept informed of licensing applications in their wards. The member officer protocol, which was approved by council last year, was strengthened to cover that specifically, to reflect members' concerns that they weren't being informed. So I do think if the committee are minded, you could put in an additional recommendation, expressing your concerns and a formal request that local members are kept informed around enforcement matters in their wards. So it's just to
okay, thank you very much. That's very helpful. Councillor Holliday.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering if there are any performance management metrics that we could view. I mean, we've only got one data point here, which is the percentage of LTEs in our housing stock, which is less than 1%. Is there anything else that's an agreed management metric for enforcement? For example, number of cases closed, or percentage of cases closed, duration of time taken, that sort of thing that would make me feel more reassured about the process?
Chairman, there are no national measures for performance on planning enforcement issues. The issues relating to local performance are reported through to our portfolio holder in terms of the regular monthly updates that are provided to the portfolio holder. We could report with portfolio holder to your next meeting as to any suggested records. As you can see in your report, we do indicate that a number of cases are being closed. We indicate that the number of outstanding enforcement cases are in fact falling significantly from first reporting to you back in the autumn of last year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just happy to take the comments and to keep people, if we're found on keeping people updated, then we need to address that, and I accept that. But I also think that there needs to be an element of self-help. We have in phase, and in phase, I get a notification as the portfolio holder when there's a change each month, but each month that is updated, and we can see how the long-term empty homes are going down. The information is there. We can look up enforcement stuff. We can ask the question. So I think there needs to be an element of self-help as well. So I'll just offer that back. I'm not absolving us of the responsibility to keep people informed. But I also think we need to encourage people to use the data and the information, that's the extensive amount of information that we have on our systems already. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, you raise a good point, and I do recognise that there is an element of that, but I think where there are key, and I wouldn't expect ward members to be kept abreast of all the enforcement matters across the ward, but I think where you've got particularly high profile or significant ones, then that's probably not an unreasonable expectation. And they also, in that paragraph, or paragraph 5.2, it says that town and parish councils are also kept informed of progress. That's not my experience in my ward, I have to say. And so I don't know whether you would find it helpful, as Officer Denny has proposed, that if we make a further recommendation that councillors be kept informed of significant enforcement. Would you find that helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. I have no problems with that at all, Mr. Chairman. I'm just offering back that there is ways people can find information, and specifically as well, a bit like with planning applications, unless we engage with the planning officer and say, I'm interested in this application, they will deal with it on delegated authority and it will go through. So I think it's incumbent on the members that are interested, and clearly the ones that we've spoken about here have already indicated that. But if there is a new case happens in a member's ward and they are interested in keeping a note on it, then they must let people know. I think that's only fair. Otherwise, as you've said, if we're telling everybody about everything, we're just creating an awful lot of work there. We need to keep it, officer time to concentrating on the things that we need to deal with. So no, I'm happy to take the recommendation. I'm not against that at all, and any improvement we can make, I welcome. But I think we need to understand that it's a two-way street in assisting one another to achieve that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I would probably put what you said a little higher, actually, in terms of member responsibility here. I would have thought that if an enforcement matter is taking place in their ward of some significance, then they have a duty to be interested. It's not optional, it's a duty. So, and I think that duty also goes the other way as well. So, and that conversation, if you like, that has to be two-way. And sometimes, let's be fair, some of us are heads down and often we don't see some of these things, and we do need a prompt, but that prompt should be all that we need to engage and do something meaningful. So that's really what we're trying to do here. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I think there's probably a slight distinction to be drawn between enforcement cases which are initiated by the authority rather than at the request of a member. And when they're new, there doesn't seem to be a tracking system similar and uniform to what we experience with planning applications, where you can register to be informed and track cases, and you get prompts when there are developments. But I found personally that once I've expressed an interest in an enforcement matter with the lead officer, that the service I get is very good. I get responses from the lead officer, quite often outside working hours of this council. I find the information I get is very good indeed. We've heard that there are additional staff and resources being put into the combined enforcement team, so perhaps this is a timely juncture to raise this, and if resources are being put into the team, that we can perhaps encourage more free-flowing information about enforcement matters. But I, like you, no doubt spend a lot of time at my parishes explaining to parish councils that enforcement isn't black and white. Cases do go forward that merit attention, but not all of them do. Which is sometimes a disappointment to our parish councils, but we have to be mindful of outcomes and the prospect for success, and we have to be careful, how many enforcement matters we pursue.
You raise a good point, and in fact, I remember when we were last considering this, we were very supportive, actually, of more resource being put in to enforcement, and it's good to see that that resource, if you like, is coming through. Although I think probably managing expectations is always the key to these things, and probably would have liked to have seen it probably before now, because as I remember as well, we recognise that unless you've got good planning enforcement, the credibility of your planning is under threat. It relies on enforcement, and if that fails, then your credibility as a planning authority is undermined. Councillor Toy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just again for information for members, that if you actually use the planning search, there is an enforcement button, and you can search for enforcements within an area, and you can track them. The information on that, for example, data set will be limited, what's in the public domain, but there is an opportunity to put that on there. Yeah, that's just some information for people.
Thank you for that.
That is a system that's there, and that's what I mean about we have an awful lot of stuff available to us already.
Okay, Councillor Withington.
Thank you for putting the Shannox on here, and I'm sure some people will twitch at the word Shannox. But you know, I have received excellent information on that, and thank you. And you've been very patient in explaining some of the complex technicalities, and that has been important in supporting the members of the public in showing you and helping them to understand. But I think possibly, I mean, CPO is mentioned a couple of times in this report for different things, and I don't know whether there's a possibility. We have had an excellent enforcement briefing before, but whether there's a possibility you can direct us to something, or whether a short, for those who are interested, briefing on what CPO actually involves, because I think we all have a predetermined idea that you just come along and say, yeah, we're buying it, and it all goes through, and that's how the public see it as well. And I certainly don't have enough knowledge to be countering public stereotypes and things like that. So I think that would be helpful. And it looks like there's going to be a few possibly coming up. So I don't know whether that's worth thinking about.
Chairman, the CPO process is a legal process, so that would be led by East Law. We would be very happy to support a briefing, but I would need to take that as a matter for our director and Cara Jordan to discuss and deliver that briefing. The CPO process is long and complex. We have been successful at the Shannox by negotiating hard. We will continue to negotiate hard, and it is very clear to me, Chairman, that there is a great deal of patience in that local community, but there is an expectation that comes with that. We're looking at delivery of development on that site for the autumn of 22, continued and completed in the autumn of 23. So we'll watch that matter carefully. We'll be happy to brief members, and where appropriate, if we can add to other briefings, then we'll take those forward as well. But unfortunately, the matter of a CPO is a legal process, so we would need East Law to lead that briefing. Thank you.
Yes, I think I support very much what Mr. Rowson said, in the sense that CPOs are mercifully rare, and they are very complex, and they are very difficult to understand. And I'm not sure that a general briefing for all councillors would serve much more than to give them an overview of it. If you happen to be unfortunate to have one in your ward, then you probably do need a more detailed conversation as to what that involves and the machinations that kind of go behind that. So I think you make a good point. Whether that's something that you would want to do as a general briefing and how detailed that would be, I would question whether that's particularly appropriate, but I certainly think that where you've got one, as I said, active in the ward, then that conversation needs to go on. Councillor Houston.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just two very quick things. I mean, as far as the planning is concerned, I always get notification of applications in my ward, which is fine, and I can just look on them and comment if I want to, if there's any need to. Equally, for delegated powers, I've been asked, and I'm perfectly happy to fulfil that function. But where we've got something that is as complex as Tataset, I would actually appreciate the opportunity to go into private session with East Law here, so we can really get to grips with where this whole process stands. You know, I've brought this up several times and it's been going on and on and on. And if we had East Law in closed or private session, then at least we would have the opportunity of understanding precisely where anything stood.
Good point. You wish to respond, Mr. Harris?
I hear the request and I'll take it forward with East Law, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to close it at this point if we can. We've got the recommendations that are we've got one recommendation actually that Cabinet notes the continued progress of the Enforcement Board and the combined enforcement team. We've got a further one which makes basically emphasis on means by which councillors are kept informed of board enforcement matters. Are you comfortable with both of those recommendations? And do I have a proposer for those, please? Councillor Housden, seconder. Councillor Fisher. Could I have a vote, show of hands, please?
Mr. Chairman, if you would.
You're abstaining, are you?
Okay, that's an abstention,
That's
Mr.
fine.
Chairman, thank you.
Okay, that looks like, with the exception of Councillor Brown, unanimous vote. Thank you. Right. I'm sorry, Mr. Rowson, we've just overshot, but I think you'll probably understand why. It's quite tricky getting to that degree of detail, but thank you for coming anyway. Thank you. Right, item 13 is the annual report of Overview and Scrutiny Committee for 2021-22.
So this report was prepared by the scrutiny officer, who unfortunately is not well today, although he's observing. So I will present it on his behalf, but it's a statutory requirement for the committee to report through to full council on the work that it's done in the previous year. So this is 21 to 22. It follows a sort of standard format, so you'll have seen this coming through before, and it summarises the work that you've undertaken, the areas that you focused on, and so on. I think it's a really good report. You know, I've looked through it. Officer Stemberich shared it with me before and with the chairman, and I just wanted to sort of highlight the sort of key issues which I think demonstrate the committee is working really well. So I think you're using all of the mechanisms available to you as a scrutiny committee to perform, you know, at a high level. So pre-scrutiny, you've used 7 times, which is a high number, and you're making regular recommendations through to Cabinet, and those recommendations are being discussed well at Cabinet and, you know, generally receiving a very positive response. You've used the council call for action, which is, you know, unique to scrutiny committees, and that's an ongoing piece of work which is reflected in your work programme. And you've established a panel to focus on a particular area of work, which again is working really effectively, and I know that, you know, there's been some really good outcomes coming from that. And also, some of you may remember in 2020, just before the pandemic, you agreed to adopting an executive scrutiny protocol, which I think we're now sort of embedding that much more with regular meetings with the leader in place. But I do think that that is reflecting well in the engagement that you have with Cabinet. You know, you've got several portfolio holders here today. I can think back a few years where we didn't have any portfolio holders attending. So I think that's a really good reflection of how Cabinet is engaging with the committee, you know, taking part and commenting on the discussion that you're having. So I think it's a really positive report. Obviously, if you've got any specific questions, I'll feed them back to Matt and he can come back to you. But this will go through to July Council if you're supportive of it, because it's slightly out of sync with the agenda again. But I'm happy to respond if I can, or to feed back to Matt if you've got any questions at all.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that we've had no call-ins during the time that I've been in the chair anyway, I think is a testimony to the fact that we are able to resolve matters, even if they're not resolved within this particular individual meeting, they're capable of being resolved elsewhere. And so I see that as a positive indicator. And so I think that's a point that we ought to draw some satisfaction from. Just drawing your attention to the recommendations, a comment that I need to make in relation to those is that this is the second time that I recall that we've made exactly the same recommendation. So I look to the leader of the council, and I look to other group leaders as well, which we have here today, to enlist your support on how we might address one or more of those issues that are there, because they do restrict the opportunities for this committee to add what I would call maximum value. So in particular, if we're not getting a full attendance, then we don't get the number of minds dwelling on the matters that we should do. And if we're not getting substitutes, then that does mean that those gaps do matter. So could I leave that one with you? And could I thank the portfolio holders for the regularity with which you attend? It is appreciated, and sometimes you do have input and sometimes you don't, but at least you're available to respond if necessary. So thank you for that. So that's all I wanted to add to that. Any questions? Councillor Penfold.
Just to comment really, Mr. Chair, to thank Matt for his great support and work for this committee, particularly personally in helping me find my feet as Vice Chairman. So just wanted to record that. Thank you.
Yes, that's a very good point. I have to say that the support that I receive as Chairman from Democratic Services is exactly what I would like, and you've certainly been responsive, and I realise that sometimes it's quite difficult to meet timescales and so on and so forth, but that's very much appreciated. Any other comments? No? Could I therefore ask for a proposer that we accept the report? Councillor Penfold propose and Councillor Blathwaite second. Could I have a show of hands on the acceptance of the report? Thank you. That looks like unanimous to me. Right. Okay. So moving then to item 14, which is the Cabinet Work Programme, followed by the Overview and Scrutiny Work Programme update.
Well, I think members will see that I've got several financial reports listed coming through to Cabinet in July. I think I can advise you now that they won't be coming through due to some capacity issues within the finance team. So we will probably be looking at September for those reports, but I will try and clarify that with all members when they'll be coming through, because those are, particularly the outturn report is one of our key financial summary reports. So we've got Officer Hempty, but at the moment the plan is that the engagement strategy will go through to the 11th of July. Otherwise, the Cabinet agenda is looking reasonably light without those finance reports on there at the moment. I haven't been advised of any other matters coming through, but I will keep members updated. And then, so that obviously then follows on through to your work programme, that those financial reports, and Matt will provide me with an update for your work programme. So he has confirmed that there'll be follow on from that expected September. The reef project review, that is currently delayed, awaiting contractor accounts close down. So we're just waiting for that final closure of accounts, and then there'll be a further review on that. We've had confirmation from the CCG and East that they can attend the July meeting. They have requested to attend remotely, which we can accommodate, I think, just to get them to travel. You know, it's much more effective use of their time if members are happy with that, but that will come to your next meeting. The Council call for action on second homes and holiday lets data. There's a report on track for July. And the public convenience review recommendations are also expected for July. And the engagement strategy briefing, which I think Matt sent out yesterday, is scheduled for the 24th of June. And obviously we encourage everyone to attend that. So actually you have quite a heavy work schedule for next month. So that's just to keep you updated there, but I'm happy to take any comments or full feedback to Matt if you've got any queries at all around your work programme.
Okay, thank you for that. Yes, I would just add that in relation to the Sharing and Leisure Centre project review, I did agree that that could slip from this month to next month on receipt of knowledge that matters that needed to be finalised, couldn't be done so in time for this meeting. So I agreed that that would slip. On the financial reports, Councillor Seward, I think that there is some concern, obviously, that we are having to slip that length of time. And when we came to look at the reports that will fall due, I think we recognised that we would place priority on the outturn report more than the other regularity reports that should come before us. I hope that's something that you can help us with.
Your concerns are the same as mine.
Thank you.
The outturn report is an essential report and very important report, as you know, Chairman.
Thank you. So I think that's the only comments that I would make in relation to that. So any questions on the work programmes of Cabinet and Overview and Scrutiny Committee? No? Okay, could I have a proposer and a seconder to accept these two reports, please? Councillor Varley and Councillor Spagnola, and a show of hands, please. Okay, that looks like unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. So we have no further business, no need to exclude the public. So I formally close the meeting and beg your pardon, before I do, Councillor Fredericks, you're waving at me frantically.
I'm so sorry, Chairman. I just wanted to give you an update on the question I had earlier. The officers have given me the breakdown of the housing. If I could just quickly just run through that for you.
Okay.
30 seconds. Okay, so we have 64 affordable rent, 96 shared ownership, 66 housing extra care flats in Fakenham included in that figure, 30 affordable rent, 36 shared ownership, and Jeff Lyons would like to give us an update in September regarding his points on the management programme, because by then we should have some information about nutrient neutrality, and that would free up some of his time. Thank you very much.
Gosh. You've set some expectations there on Friday. Right, okay, thank you for that. Any comments in relation to what's just been given? Councillor Holliday.
Could that be emailed, please, Wendy? Because I didn't get that.
Certainly can.
Okay, right, there being no other business to transact today, I formally close the meeting and thank everybody for your attendance and your contributions today.